A nameless body on a cold beach, a cryptic code, and 70 years of haunting silence. Now, a DNA breakthrough finally unmasks the Somerton man, exposing a devastating secret that will rewrite one family's history forever. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, purple shadows across the tranquil waters of Somerton Park Beach. It was the first day of December, 1948, a warm evening settling over Adelaide, South Australia. A gentle breeze whispered through the dune grasses, carrying the faint scent of salt and distant eucalyptus. This serene twilight, however, was about to give way to a mystery so profound, so utterly baffling, that it would echo through the decades, capturing the imagination of the world and defying every attempt at a solution. Early morning beachgoers, seeking the crisp air and quiet solitude, were the first to encounter him. There, leaning against the seawall, as if merely resting after a leisurely stroll, sat a man. His posture was unnaturally serene, almost sculptural. He was impeccably dressed, a figure of surprising elegance amidst the wild, untamed beauty of the coastline. A double-breasted suit, immaculately pressed, a pristine white shirt, perfectly buttoned, a tie knotted with precision, polished tan shoes. Every detail suggested a man of means, a man accustomed to a certain standard of living, perhaps even a traveler of some distinction. But he was motionless, unresponsive, and very, very dead. When the authorities arrived, their initial assessment only deepened the enigma. There were no obvious signs of struggle on the man or around him, no visible wounds, no bloodstains to tell a violent tale. He appeared to have simply passed away, peacefully, his head propped against the concrete barrier, one arm casually extended. Yet, beneath this veneer of calm lay a disturbing void. Every pocket was empty. There was no wallet, no money, no identification whatsoever. Not a single card, not a scrap of paper that might offer a clue to his name, his profession, his very existence. Even more chilling was the discovery that every label, from his tailored jacket to his underwear, had been meticulously cut away, rendering his clothing utterly anonymous. It was as if someone had deliberately tried to erase his history, piece by painstaking piece. Who was this perfectly presented stranger, discovered on a quiet Australian beach, stripped of every identifier? Why would someone go to such lengths to erase their identity, or have it erased for them? Was this a tragic accident, a deliberate act of self-erasure, or something far more sinister? The man on Somerton Beach presented a blank slate, an impossible puzzle dropped into the heart of a peaceful city. He was a ghost in the flesh, a body without a past, and his silent presence immediately ignited a cascade of questions that would confound investigators for generations. The clock began ticking on one of Australia's most enduring and perplexing mysteries, the case of the Somerton man. Laying on the steel table of the Adelaide morgue, the well-dressed stranger presented a chilling paradox. He was a picture of mid-century elegance, yet his clothes possessed an eerie anonymity. Every single label had been meticulously sliced away. From his double-breasted coat to his tie, even his underwear, someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to strip this man of his identity. No wallet, no ID, not a single coin remained. It was as if he had been deliberately erased from the world. Pathologist John Barclay Bennett suspected a fast-acting, undetectable poison, pointing to the man's strangely congested organs and an enlarged spleen. Yet, there were no traces of toxins. Then there were the physical anomalies. His toes were oddly wedged, and his calf muscles were unusually, powerfully developed. This fueled decades of wild, romantic speculation. Was he a professional ballet dancer, or perhaps a shadow-dwelling Cold War spy? But the most baffling clue was stitched deep within the fabric of his trousers. Tucked inside a secret, custom-made fob pocket, police discovered a tiny, tightly rolled scrap of paper. On it were printed two words, Tamam Shud. This was no random phrase. It translates from Persian as, "It is ended" or "finished." It was the final phrase from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a masterpiece penned by the legendary Persian poet born in Nishapur, deep within ancient Persia, modern-day Iran, and certainly not Uzbekistan, despite later misconceptions. Months later, the very book from which that scrap had been torn was found tossed into the back of an unlocked car. On its back cover, investigators found a phone number, the name, Jestyn, belonging to nurse Jessica Thompson, and a bizarre, uncracked 44-letter handwritten code that has defied cryptographers for generations. For decades, the Somerton man remained a ghost. In 2009, engineer Derek Abbott began a relentless crusade to solve the riddle. Finally, in 2022, a monumental breakthrough occurred. Abbott and forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick extracted trace DNA from hairs trapped in the man's original plaster death mask. They identified him as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker born in Melbourne in 1905. The spy thrillers and ballet fantasies evaporated into the reality of a tragic, ordinary life. Yet, even with a name, the core of the enigma remains untouched. We still do not know why Carl Webb died on that lonely beach, what his cryptic handwritten code means, or the true nature of his mysterious link to Jessica Thompson. Some secrets, it seems, are destined to remain ended, yet entirely unfinished. The breakthrough didn't come from a dusty police archive, but from the back seat of an unlocked car parked near Somerton Beach. A local businessman stepped forward, handing detectives a rare, pocket-sized translation of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, the legendary Persian poet. He had found it tossed onto the floorboards around the very time the mystery man died. When investigators examined the book, they found the ultimate puzzle piece. The final page was torn, and the tiny paper scrap reading, Tamam Shud, recovered from the dead man's secret trouser pocket matched the tear perfectly. The book and the body were now inextricably linked. But it was the back cover of this ancient Persian poetry book that blew the case wide open. Penciled faintly onto the paper were 5 lines of jumbled, capital letters. Some were crossed out, as if written in haste or under extreme duress. 44 characters in total. A code. Cryptographers from naval intelligence, military codebreakers, and elite civilian sleuths all descended upon these letters, trying to find a pattern, a cipher, a key. They found absolutely nothing. To this day, the sequence remains completely uncracked, a silent sentinel guarding a secret that died on the sand. Beneath the cipher, detectives discovered another clue, a faint, handwritten phone number. It led them to a quiet, tree-lined street in Glenelg, just a short walk from where the body was found. The number belonged to a young nurse named Jessica Thompson, though in the police files, she would forever be known by her mysterious pseudonym, Jestyn. When shown a plaster death mask of the unidentified man, Jestyn's reaction was visceral. Observers noted she seemed completely overcome, on the verge of fainting, staring at the plaster face with intense recognition. Yet, she steadfastly denied knowing him. Who was this young nurse, and why did a dying man carry her unlisted phone number scribbled inside a book of ancient Persian poetry? Instantly, the air grew thick with intense speculation. Was this a tragic story of a forbidden love affair, or something far more dangerous? In the tense, paranoid atmosphere of the early Cold War, wild theories ran rampant. Perhaps the handwritten code was a microtransmission, and Jestyn was his secret handler. The sudden discovery of this book transformed a quiet beachside tragedy into an international spiderweb of espionage, romance, and coded secrets, leaving investigators staring at 44 letters that refused to speak. The enigma deepened significantly not just with what the Somerton man carried, or rather, what he didn't, but with the very body itself. As investigators struggled to piece together his identity from the few cryptic clues unearthed, the grim task of understanding how he died fell to one man, pathologist John Barclay Bennett. His initial examination revealed no obvious cause of death. There were no signs of struggle, no visible wounds, no indications of violence. The man lay perfectly preserved, almost serene, against the seawall. Yet, beneath this tranquil exterior, Bennett found disturbing anomalies that hinted at a far more sinister truth. The internal organs told a different story. Bennett noted a significantly enlarged spleen, alongside congestion in the liver, brain, and other vital organs. These findings were baffling. They pointed towards a systemic failure, a rapid and acute collapse, but without any clear external trauma or disease. The meticulous removal of every clothing label, the absence of a wallet or identification, all these factors led Bennett to a chilling conclusion: undetectable poison. He suspected a fast-acting, sophisticated toxic agent, one that left no trace modern forensics could then detect, dissolving harmlessly or mimicking natural death. It was a theory that would haunt the case for decades, whispering of an insidious plot rather than a natural demise. But the mysteries weren't confined to his internal state. Bennett also observed something remarkably distinctive about the man's physique: unusually developed calf muscles, particularly high and pronounced. This unique musculature immediately sparked a flurry of speculation among a public captivated by the unfolding drama. Was he a professional dancer, perhaps a ballet performer whose rigorous training had sculpted such powerful legs? Or could these athletic calves hint at a life of constant movement, quick escapes, and demanding physical exertion? The Cold War was in full swing, and the world was gripped by a pervasive paranoia of espionage. Whispers began to circulate. Could this impeccably dressed, anonymous man, found dead with a cryptic Persian verse and a body full of secrets, be a spy? The enhanced physique, the suspected poison, the deliberate removal of all identifying marks, it all seemed to fit the profile of a shadowy operative, a ghost in the great game of nations. These theories, sensational and compelling, provided thrilling narratives but offered little in the way of concrete answers. The body of the Somerton man, meticulously examined and catalogued, only deepened the questions, transforming him from a simple stranger into a walking, breathing, silent mystery. As the initial flurry of police investigation subsided, the Somerton man case didn't fade into obscurity, it evolved. The official channels might have cooled, but public fascination only intensified, simmering for decades like a forgotten kettle on a low flame. With no identity, no motive, and no clear cause of death, the vacuum of information became a canvas for endless speculation. The impeccable attire, the removed labels, the hidden Tamam Shud scrap, each detail added a layer of intrigue, fueling a mythology that captivated generations. The initial pathologist, John Barclay Bennett, had suspected an undetectable poison, a theory that only deepened the mystery, suggesting a clandestine world. The unusually developed calf muscles, observed during the autopsy, gave rise to persistent, if unproven, theories of the man being a ballet dancer. And the sheer secrecy, the lack of any traceable past, whispered of a Cold War spy, a man whose life was designed to leave no trace. These were the enduring myths, spun from fragments of observation and the human need to impose narrative on the inexplicable. News cycles might move on, but the Somerton man became a permanent resident in the collective Australian consciousness, a ghost on the beach. Amateur sleuths, historians, and armchair detectives pored over every released detail, every newspaper clipping, debating the cryptic 44-letter code found in the Rubaiyat, and the elusive Jestyn. Online forums buzzed, books were written, and the case became a benchmark for unsolved mysteries. It was into this decades-long obsession that, in 2009, a fresh, methodical mind stepped forward, Derek Abbott, an electrical engineer at the University of Adelaide. He wasn't looking for sensational headlines but for scientific answers. Abbott's approach was a stark contrast to the speculative fervor. He applied a rigorous, analytical lens to the aging evidence, particularly focusing on the plaster death mask. He saw not just a historical enigma, but a problem awaiting modern techniques, a challenge to be met with data, genetics, and a relentless dedication that promised, after more than 60 years, a renewed hope for the Somerton man. For over 70 years, the plaster cast of the Somerton man's face sat in a cold museum archive, a silent, ghostly witness to one of the 20th century's greatest enigmas. Its blind eyes stared into the void, holding a secret that seemed destined to remain buried forever. But science has a way of catching up with history, and in 2022, the cold case of the century was blown wide open, not by a dusty police file, but by the microscopic threads of life itself. For years, University of Adelaide researcher Derek Abbott had been obsessed with the case, searching for a breakthrough that traditional detective work could never deliver. He teamed up with pioneering American forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick. Their target was not the deeply degraded bones buried in an Adelaide cemetery, but something far more intimate, the plaster death mask itself. When the wet plaster had been pressed onto the dead man's face in 1948, it had accidentally trapped several of his hairs. Locked inside those plaster-encased roots was the ultimate biological blueprint. With painstaking precision, Abbott and Fitzpatrick extracted DNA from these tiny, fragile hair shafts. Using the cutting-edge tools of modern forensic genealogy, they uploaded the genetic profile into global databases, searching for distant cousins, building massive family trees that branched back into the 19th century. They were looking for a needle in a digital haystack of millions. Then, the branches of the family tree converged. The genetic trail led back to Victoria, Australia, pointing directly to one man, Carl Charles Webb. Born in Melbourne in 1905, Webb was not a Soviet agent or a classical dancer, as decades of wild speculation had suggested. He was a 43-year-old electrical engineer and instrument maker, a man who loved betting on horses and had vanished from his family's radar in April 1948. The Phantom of Somerton Beach finally had a name. Yet, this monumental breakthrough did not close the file, it only sharpened the mystery. While we now know who he was, the shadows of Somerton Park refused to fully retreat. We still do not know why this quiet Melbourne engineer traveled to Adelaide, why he died alone against a seawall, what the cryptic handwritten code on the book cover truly means, or what his exact, elusive connection was to the nurse known as Jestyn. Carl Webb's name has been restored to history, but his final, desperate hours remain locked in silence. For decades, the face of the Somerton man, preserved in a plaster death mask, stared back at us, a symbol of an unsolvable enigma. His story, a tapestry woven with cryptic clues, a hidden Tamam Shud scrap, an unbroken code, the phantom scent of poison, and a woman named Jestyn. But in 2022, after 74 years of relentless pursuit, the silent sentinel finally spoke. The breakthrough, forged in the meticulous work of engineer Derek Abbott and forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick, came from the most unlikely of places, strands of hair, microscopically preserved within that very death mask. DNA, plucked from the past, offered a name. The man found lifeless against the Somerton seawall on that December morning in 1948 was Carl Charles Webb. Born in Melbourne in 1905, Carl Webb was an electrical engineer and an instrument maker. A man with a profession, a birth year, a family. This was no longer just the Somerton man, the perfect stranger, he was Carl Webb. This revelation, a monumental leap in one of Australia's most enduring cold cases, immediately shifted the landscape of inquiry. The focus moved from who he was to what happened to Carl Webb. With a name came tantalizing, yet frustratingly sparse, glimpses into his life. Records suggest a marriage, a potential separation, and a last known address in Melbourne. But the years leading up to his appearance on Somerton Beach remained shrouded in shadow. Why had this electrical engineer, impeccably dressed but stripped of any personal identification, traveled hundreds of miles to Adelaide? Where were his belongings? Why was he carrying the deeply personal, final words of Omar Khayyam? The questions that haunted investigators for generations now gained new urgency, tethered to a real person. What was the meaning of the elaborate 44-letter code, found on the back of the Rubaiyat, now known to have been in Carl Webb's possession? What was his precise connection to Jessica Thompson, the nurse whose phone number was also scribbled there? Pathologist John Barclay Bennett's initial suspicions of an undetectable poison, the enlarged spleen, the unusually developed calf muscles that fueled speculative theories of dancers or Cold War spies, these details now point to Carl Webb. Were these characteristics evidence of a specific trade, or symptoms of an unknown ailment, or something far more sinister? The identification of Carl Charles Webb is a triumph of modern forensic science, a testament to decades of dedication. Yet, even with his name finally known, the fundamental mysteries persist. Why did he die? What secrets did he carry, and why did they lead him to that desolate beach? The final chapters of Carl Webb's story, like the cryptic code he left behind, remain stubbornly unwritten. The plaster mask has finally surrendered its most closely guarded secret, stripping away 74 years of anonymity to reveal the face of Carl Charles Webb. The tireless work of engineer Derek Abbott and forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick transformed a phantom into a flesh-and-blood Melbourne instrument maker. Yet, as the ink dries on his long-delayed death certificate, we are forced to confront a chilling truth: a name is not an explanation. The identification of Carl Webb has not solved the mystery of Somerton Beach, it has merely reframed it, stripping away the romanticized myths of Cold War espionage and elite ballet dancers to expose a far more intimate, haunting reality. We are left staring into the same dark void that baffled detectives in 1948. How did an ordinary electrical engineer from Victoria end up dead against a South Australian seawall with every label meticulously sliced from his clothing? The cause of death remains as elusive as it was when pathologist John Barclay Bennett first examined the congested organs and enlarged spleen, suspecting a rapid, undetectable poison that left no trace in the stomach or blood. Was it suicide, or did someone slip a lethal dose into his final drink? And what of the bizarre artifacts that define his final hours? The scrap of paper bearing Tamam Shud, the Persian phrase for "it is ended," penned by the ancient poet Omar Khayyam, tells us where the book ended, but not why Webb carried it. The 44 handwritten letters scribbled on the back of that very same volume remain an uncracked cipher, mocking the world's finest cryptographers. Is it a complex code, a sequence of horse racing bets, or the tragic, scrambled thoughts of a dying man? Most tantalizing of all is the shadow of Jestyn, Nurse Jessica Thompson. Why did she possess a copy of the rubaiyat linked to the very book found in Webb's orbit? Why did she nearly faint upon seeing his plaster bust, yet deny any knowledge of him to her dying day? Their exact connection remains a locked vault, a secret buried with them both in the dry Australian earth. Carl Webb is no longer a John Doe. But knowing who he was only deepens the tragedy of how, and why, he died. On that cold December morning, a man died alone, and despite all our modern science, his ultimate secrets remain buried forever in the sand. Before you go, here's the thing. Every week we investigate another mystery the world could never solve. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And here's the most important part. The next case we investigate could be yours. Tell us in the comments which unsolved mystery, disappearance, or disaster we should cover next. We read every suggestion, and the stories that stay with you are the ones we bring to life.